So we're talking with Scott Palmer here, who is the artistic director of the company and the director and adapter of The Tempest or The Enchanted Isle.
Correct.
And this is an adaptation of Shakespeare,
That's correct.
who also adapted other people's work.
That's correct.
So,
Yes.
clarify.
So Shakespeare wrote his original version of The Tempest. It was his last play. He wrote it in 1611, exactly 400 years ago. And about 80 years later, during the Restoration, two other guys, John Dryden and William Davenant, rewrote it and turned it into a Restoration-era comedy. It was very long and full of a bunch of music, which is a little difficult for us to do. It's sort of big Broadway musical outdoors in the plaza, a little bit of a challenge. So I then cut about 2.5 hours of their version.
Wow.
And then rewrote some sections to make it a little bit more accessible to modern audiences. So it's a Scott Palmer adaptation of a Dryden and Davenant adaptation of a Shakespearean play.
That's highly complex.
I know. It'll be very easy for the audience, though, because it's hilarious and very straightforward.
But it's going to have a flavor of a restoration comedy, right?
It is. So, yeah, what we've really done is kind of looked at the feeling and the values behind the Restoration. Dryden and Davenant were both hilarious writers, very, very popular at the time. In fact, their version of The Tempest was far more popular than Shakespeare's ever was. It essentially dominated English stages for almost 200 years.
Wow.
And it's very funny. It's filled with lots of innuendo and very kind of foppish and tongue-in-cheek, and it's absolutely hilarious. And they've added a whole bunch of new characters and new situations, and it's really, really funny.
But they'll recognize the Tempest story still.
Yeah, the Tempest story is essentially intact.
Right.
It's essentially there, but it's become a little bit more complex. You've got a sister for Miranda. Her name is Dorinda. There's a new love interest for the girls. His name is Hippolito. There's a sister for Caliban. Her name is Sycorax. So all of the stuff that happens in Shakespeare's The Tempest is still in there. It's just more complicated and more restoration comedy.
Gotcha.
Yeah,
okay.
It's very funny.
Right on.
You got Prospero and Trinculo and Stefano and all those guys, all those crazy characters.
And the Storm and the wacky magic.
The Storm and all that kind of stuff. My favorite new character that Dryden and Davenant created is a guy named Mustachio, who's a third clown that runs around with Stefano and Trinculo. He's hilarious. Very, very funny.
Nice. And that's going to be played by
Jen Waters.
Oh, yeah.
Some people may remember her. She was one of the Dromios in our Warner Brothers sort of cartoon version of the Comedy of Errors a few years ago. She's hilarious. She's very, very excited.
That's great.
Yeah,
well,
we're happy to have her back.
We look forward to seeing it.
It's going to be very funny.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.